Patience. What's the funniest or weirdest thing that happened in a waiting room? I was in a waiting room once that genuinely felt like it was the universe's attempt at testing how much absurdity a single group of people could handle before society collapsed. It was a Tuesday morning, which in my experience is the safest, most boring time to go to a clinic because nobody has the energy to be weird. But apparently, Tuesday morning 2019 was the exception. I walked in to check in for a routine appointment and immediately noticed that everyone was staring at a man in the corner who looked like he was holding something close to his chest, like it was fragile. At first, I thought it was a baby, until the blanket slid down and I realized it was a giant bread loaf, like a fresh artisan sourdough the size of a small dog. He kept whispering to it, and at one point kissed the crust. Everyone pretended this was normal, because nobody wants to talk to the person who brings emotional support carbs into a medical facility. The receptionist kept glancing over like she wanted to say something but had officially given up on having standards. I sat down 2 seats away from a woman loudly FaceTiming someone, and the conversation consisted of her showing her swollen ankle and screaming, "Look how blue it is now," every 30 seconds. A teenager beside her gagged every time she zoomed in. But before I could even get annoyed, the automatic doors opened and an elderly man walked in with a giant cage containing a parrot that looked like it had seen things. The parrot locked eyes with me and squawked, "Don't trust him." Even though I had done absolutely nothing except breathe, the man apologized and muttered, "He's been dramatic since Tuesday," which raised more questions than answers because it was Tuesday. Then out of nowhere, the bread man gasped dramatically and clutched his sourdough like it was fainting. The parrot shrieked, "Medic! Medic!" while everyone stared. A nurse came out to ask who was next, took one look at the scene, closed her eyes for a second like she was praying, then quietly returned to the hallway without calling a name. While this was happening, a toddler escaped his mother, sprinted across the room, and tried to pet the parrot, which responded by yelling, "Lawyer!" at full volume. The toddler burst into tears, which caused the FaceTime woman to start yelling at the toddler's mom, which made the bread man stand up and shout, "Everyone calm down, you're stressing the loaf." Some guy in a suit across the room muttered, "This is why I drink," loud enough for all of us to hear. Meanwhile, an older lady with a walker suddenly announced she was going to perform a calming hymn and started singing loudly and off-key, which somehow only added more stress to the atmosphere. The parrot began harmonizing, or trying to with loud discordant whistles. Breadman started humming along deeply like he was offering the loaf spiritual energy. The toddler, now fully recovered from the parrot drama, joined in by screaming random vowels. And all of this happened before my appointment was even 10 minutes late. Then things escalated. A teen boy got up and attempted to record the parrot yelling at people for TikTok. The parrot spotted the phone and shouted, "I'll sue," with such conviction that the boy almost dropped his phone. FaceTime lady turned her camera to the parrot and yelled, "Look at this bird, he's famous now," which made the parrot even angrier. The bread man stormed over and demanded everyone respect his loaf's personal space because yeast is sensitive to tension. A guy near the water cooler asked loudly, "Is this performance art? Am I being pranked?" And honestly, none of us could answer confidently. While the chaos continued, someone's ringtone went off a dramatic opera song at full volume, and nobody claimed it. So the music played for an entire minute while everyone tried to pretend it wasn't happening. The toddler started dancing. The parrot screamed the same note in perfect pitch. Breadman rocked his loaf to the rhythm like it was a baby at a rave. That's when a nurse finally emerged again, took in the scene with dead eyes and muttered, "I'm not paid enough for this," before calling the next patient, who was too stunned to react. Then the moment that broke the waiting room happened. The bread man accidentally dropped the loaf. It rolled across the floor like a runaway wheel of cheese. The toddler ran after it. The parrot shrieked, "Murder!" The FaceTime woman turned her camera to follow the chase. The older singing woman yelled, "Not the sacred bread!" and everyone gasped like the loaf was a beloved community member. The bread finally stopped when it hit the office door and the receptionist, who had clearly reached her emotional limit, simply said, "Sir, please contain your bakery items." The bread man looked devastated and whispered, "He's bruised." I don't know why, but everyone acted like that was a medical emergency. Even the parrot went quiet for a second. Then with perfect comedic timing, the receptionist called my name. And just as I stood up, the parrot yelled, "Run while you can," which made the entire waiting room burst into chaotic laughter. I went into my appointment still trying to figure out if I hallucinated the whole thing, and the weirdest part, when I came out 15 minutes later, everything was perfectly calm, Breadman was gone, the parrot was silent, the toddler was asleep. It was like the chaos had evaporated the second I left the room. To this day, I genuinely don't know if I witnessed a bizarre slice of everyday clinic life or if I stepped through some kind of waiting room wormhole where reality bends and everyone loses their minds, but I swear on my life that parrot was right, I should have run. I swear on everything holy that the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a waiting room happened during what was supposed to be a routine checkup at a walk-in clinic on a random Tuesday afternoon. I walked in expecting soft elevator music and bored people scrolling their phones. But instead, the first thing I saw was an elderly man angrily whispering at a vending machine like it owed him money. At first, I thought he was just frustrated, but no, he was full-on bargaining with it, promising it one last chance to release his bag of pretzels or he would take matters into his own hands. I sat down quietly, hoping I wouldn't get pulled into whatever chaos was brewing, but that hope lasted about 10 seconds because a toddler across from me was sucking on a stethoscope like it was a popsicle. His mother didn't notice she was arguing with her boyfriend about who forgot the insurance card, while the kid kept hitting himself in the head with the stethoscope, like he was testing for brain echoes. Then an older woman next to me leaned over and whispered, "He's gonna grow up to be a doctor someday," like this was the start of his medical career. Things escalated when a teenage girl burst through the doors loudly announcing to the entire room that she might be dying from a mysterious allergic reaction to emotional stress. She was dead serious. Her boyfriend kept patting her dramatically like she was fainting in a Victorian novel. The receptionist didn't even lift her head. She just slid a clipboard across the counter like she'd seen this movie too many times. Right as the teenager was trying to demonstrate her symptoms, a man walked in holding a giant iguana wearing a tiny sweater. He acted like the most normal person in the room, casually checking in and asking if Dr. Peters still saw emotional support, reptiles. The iguana looked at each of us like it knew we were all idiots. The toddler screamed "dinosaur" and immediately lunged toward it, which caused the iguana to sprint across the floor, the man to chase after it, and the teenager to shriek that she was going into anaphylactic shock, while everyone was distracted by the lizard apocalypse vending machine guy chose that moment to declare war. He stomped up, grabbed the front of the machine, and started shaking it so violently that everyone thought it might topple over. The receptionist screamed his name like she had dealt with this before. The pretzels finally dropped, but so did 3 random items, and he proudly scooped them up like he just liberated them from captivity. Somehow, this wasn't even the peak of the chaos. A woman behind me suddenly gasped and started yelling that she saw a ghost sitting in the chair next to her. Half the room froze. Half the room tried to pretend they didn't hear it, and the teenage girl groaned dramatically like the ghost was personally targeting her. The ghost woman insisted the seat was definitely occupied and refused to sit down again because she didn't want to offend the spirit. The receptionist whispered to a nurse, "Why is it always my shift?" Meanwhile, the iguana finally crawled onto a chair and refused to move, staring judgmentally at the toddler who was now crying because the dinosaur hates me. The boyfriend of the emotionally allergic girl tried to console the toddler while also fanning his girlfriend with a pamphlet titled "Understanding Your Bowel Health." She kept insisting she could feel her throat closing, even though she was talking nonstop and eating Skittles. Then an old woman's phone started blaring heavy metal at maximum volume. She panicked and started slapping the phone like it was misbehaving. That triggered the vending machine guy, who started shouting that technology has become disrespectful. The receptionist yelled his name again louder this time, like she was disciplining a hyperactive dog. At that moment, a man walked in with a plastic bag over his hand and announced he needed to see a doctor. Immediately, because I think I have worms under my skin. Everyone went silent. Even the iguana blinked slowly like, bro, what? The nurse immediately escorted him to a room without asking a single question. The receptionist wrote something on a sticky note that looked suspiciously like, I need a new job. Finally, a nurse called my name. But even walking to the door was an adventure because I had to step over a trail of Skittles, dodge the toddler, who was now trying to touch the iguana again, walk around the ghost lady who was guarding the empty chair like it was a sacred shrine, and squeeze past vending machine guy who muttered, they never expect you to win. As I reached the hallway, the nurse leaned over and whispered, this isn't even the weirdest thing that's happened today. And honestly, I believe her, I really do. I swear on everything holy, the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a waiting room happened last year when I was at an urgent care getting my ankle checked out, and it unfolded like some kind of low-budget sitcom that no writer would dare pitch because it would sound too unrealistic to film. I limped in thinking the worst thing I'd experienced that day was the pain, but no, apparently fate had other plans. Because I walked right into what I now refer to as the Great Emotional Support Ferret Incident of 2024. It started when a woman in her late 60s walked in holding a leopard print tote bag that wriggled like it was alive, which should have been my first clue that this wasn't going to be a normal visit, but I chalked it up to pain meds and minding my own business. She signed in, sat down, and gently unzipped the bag, revealing of all things a very alert, very fluffy ferret wearing a tiny knitted sweater that said, handsome boy. The receptionist immediately froze like she was buffering because the sign on the wall clearly said, only service animals permitted, and unless things had changed dramatically in the last decade, ferrets were not typically in the service animal rotation, but the lady saw the receptionist staring and confidently announced, this is Mr. Whiskerson, my medically necessary emotional support ferret, as if this were the most obvious and universally accepted fact on Earth. Before the receptionist could respond, the ferret decided freedom was the mission of the day and launched out of the tote bag like it had just been released from a cannon. It sprinted across the waiting room with cartoon speed, zigzagging between chairs, knocking over a cup of iced coffee, and causing a chain reaction of screams, gasps, and one man yelling, "Hell no!" as he lifted his feet off the floor like the ferret was a venomous snake. The chaotic energy doubled when a little kid, maybe 5 or 6, saw the ferret and shouted, "Is that a cat snake?" Before taking off in hot pursuit, the kid's mother chased after him yelling, "No, you don't touch strangers' animals," while the kid yelled, "But he's so long." Meanwhile, Mr. Whiskerson squeezed under the row of chairs resurfaced by the water cooler, and then climbed inside the cooler's base cabinet like he was exploring a dungeon. The receptionist frantically paged the back office for help, and 2 nurses emerged looking like people who earned their degrees to avoid exactly this type of nonsense. The older woman, instead of helping, clutched her tote bag and dramatically declared, "He can sense your negativity, that's why he ran," which did not improve morale. At this point, the entire waiting room was divided into 2 groups. Team Catch the Ferret and Team I'm going to pretend this isn't happening because I have enough problems already. I was somewhere in the middle, mostly watching while holding my swollen ankle like it was popcorn movie night. A teenage boy decided to help by using his hoodie like a net, but Mr. Whiskerson darted between his legs and made a beeline for the automatic doors. The doors opened. He paused dramatically at the threshold like a majestic woodland creature surveying his new kingdom. And then he sprinted into the parking lot. The older woman shrieked like someone had stolen her firstborn and bolted after him with surprising speed for her age. 2 nurses chased her. The kid chased the nurses, the mom chased the kid, and the teenage boy recorded the entire thing on his phone saying, "This is going on TikTok," like he was announcing a political victory. The receptionist looked genuinely seconds away from quitting her job and starting a new life in the mountains. After a deeply chaotic 3-minute pursuit in the parking lot, one of the nurses finally scooped up Mr. Whiskerson, using her jacket like she'd been training for a ferret wrangling competition her whole life. They all came back inside looking like they'd just survived a natural disaster. The woman scolded the nurse for holding him too firmly. The nurse simply stared at her with the eyes of someone who now needed hazard pay, and the receptionist firmly informed the woman that Mr. Whiskerson could not stay in the waiting room. The woman protested, claiming it was medical discrimination, until the receptionist calmly offered to reschedule her appointment for a day when she could leave the ferret at home. The woman finally agreed, took her wriggling emotional support noodle, and left in a dramatic huff, like we had all deeply wronged her. The waiting room went silent for a full 10 seconds afterward, and then the man who yelled, "Hell no," earlier muttered, "I just came for a refill," and everyone burst out laughing. My ankles still hurt like hell, but honestly, I didn't even mind anymore because I got to witness a live-action sitcom for free. To this day, I swear that Ferret had stronger main character energy than any human in that building. And the best part, a week later, someone sent me the TikTok of the whole incident. It had 32 million views. Mr. Whiskerson deserved every one of them. I once walked into the waiting room of my local clinic and immediately noticed a crowd forming around something in the corner. As I got closer, I realized a full-grown llama had somehow been brought in. The receptionist looked equally stunned, but was nodding politely, like, "Oh yes, he's our newest patient." A man in a cowboy hat was arguing with the staff about why his llama needed a checkup. Apparently, it had a twitchy ear, and he was convinced it was a symptom of depression. Meanwhile, other patients were trying to take photos on their phones, toddlers were squealing, and an elderly woman shouted, "Back in my day, llamas didn't need therapy." The llama seemed unbothered, calmly chewing on a discarded magazine. After an hour of paperwork, vet techs came in with a stethoscope and asked the man to move to an examination room. Chaos ensued as the llama tried to follow him, knocking over chairs and scattering magazines. By the end, the entire waiting room was coated in llama fur. People were laughing hysterically, and I left still questioning my life choices for choosing that clinic. I was in a waiting room once that had a soft piano playing in the background. Out of nowhere, a guy started singing along, badly. Then a little girl joined him with her toy microphone. By minute 10, a full-blown karaoke session erupted. People were singing everything from Bohemian Rhapsody to Baby Shark while the receptionist held a clipboard, pretending this was normal. At one point, a man in a suit started beatboxing and trying to convince everyone to form a chorus. It was a mixture of chaotic energy and pure embarrassment. But no one left because apparently the doctor was running 2 hours late. By the end, everyone in the room was laughing, crying, or recording the madness. That waiting room became a temporary concert hall, and the clinic staff had to bribe everyone with free lollipops just to get the room back under control. A woman stormed into the waiting room clutching a small plastic bag with water in it. She screamed, "It's an emergency! My goldfish isn't swimming straight!" The receptionist blinked, muttered something about, "We don't do aquatics," and pointed toward the pediatric wing. But she wasn't having it. She insisted on sitting in the waiting room while the fish doctor evaluated her pet. The fish flopped uselessly in the bag while other patients stared, some laughing, some genuinely concerned for the fish. A little boy started whispering that it looked like the fish was dead from judgment, and the woman glared at him. Somehow, she ended up lecturing an entire row of waiting patients on proper aquatic first aid while everyone tried to hold back laughter. Hours later, she left, claiming she had saved its soul with meditation techniques. The lobby smelled faintly of water and stress for days after. One time, the waiting room was full of elderly patients during flu season, and suddenly it turned into a bizarre competition. Everyone started coughing loudly, each one trying to outdo the other. One man produced a dramatic, chest-shaking cough that sounded like a dying walrus. A woman responded with a phlegm-laden echo that made people gag. A younger guy joined in with a wet, hacking effort, holding his hand dramatically over his heart. The receptionist, frazzled, muttered that this was the weirdest symphony she had ever endured. People were laughing and coughing at the same time, and anyone trying to read a magazine was being assaulted by fits of simultaneous hacking. By the end, everyone in the waiting room was red-faced and wheezing, but oddly satisfied as if they had bonded over the ridiculousness of their collective illnesses. There was a day when two kids, about 8 and 10, started pretending they were in a medieval duel while sitting in the waiting room. They were swishing imaginary swords and yelling battle cries. Adults tried to shush them, but the kids escalated into full-blown performances, blocking invisible attacks, casting magic spells on each other, and climbing chairs as if they were castle towers. One elderly man joined in, pretending to be a wizard casting spells from a walker. Meanwhile, the nurse called them repeatedly for actual appointments, but they refused to leave until the final battle was concluded. At one point, a toddler wandered in and became the dragon, resulting in everyone screaming in mock terror. The waiting room became a chaotic theater, and for 20 minutes, the clinic's patients were completely lost in this imaginary world. Eventually, parents and staff managed to corral the kids, but people were still laughing about it when it was their turn to see the doctor.